Okay, welcome everyone. The Board Legislative Committee meeting of the East Bay Regional Park District on Tuesday, May 24th, 2022, beginning at 12:33 is now beginning. I'd like to ask our recording secretary, Rachel Arbios, to please take the roll.
Thank you. This is Rachel Arbios, recording secretary, taking roll. Chair Eccles.
Present.
Director Lane. Here. Director Waspy.
Here.
Park District staff participating in this meeting include AGM Deborah Ocker, Chief of Government Affairs Eric Fueller, Legislative and Policy Management Analyst Lisa Baldinger, Legislative Assistant Flora Chantos, Federal Advocate Peter Umhofer, State Advocate Doug Houston. And I will now state the ways that members of the public can submit public comments. Today's meeting is held pursuant to the Brown Act as amended by AB 361. Board members and staff may participate via phone or video conferencing. We are providing live audio and video streaming. For those members of the public not attending in person, public comments may be submitted one of three ways. 1, live via Zoom, 2, via email, or 3, via voicemail, as noted on the agenda. If there are no questions about the meeting procedures, we will begin.
Great, thank you very much, Madam Secretary. So I believe we're ready to start with our first agenda item, the Government Affairs Committee comments.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Eccles. Eric Fueller, Chief of Government and Legislative Affairs. And we had two comments. One is quick on behalf of the DGM, who had participated in a panel session at the California Special Districts Association legislative days last week on permitting and streamlining permitting for restoration projects. And it was well received. Flora was in attendance. The DGM said that there's opportunities to continue to work with the Little Hoover Commission and others on this issue. So we'll be pursuing that, and perhaps she'll report more on it at our next meeting. And then I'd like to hand over the discussion to Lisa Baldinger, who has a presentation on 30 by 30 and some funding opportunities. So Lisa.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me all right on the Zoom? Thank you, Director Eccles. Good afternoon, Lisa Baldinger, Legislative and Policy Management Analyst, and I'm here today just to give a really brief update on the 30 by 30 program, as well as just 2022 advocacy at large through the lens of that program. So Pathways to 30 by 30 is a California goal to conserve 30% of our lands and waters by the year 2030. It was put into place by Governor Newsom's Executive Order N8220. This is a goal that's also reflected at the national level. President Biden also did put an executive order for preserving 30% of America's lands and waters by 2030. It's also reflected globally. France and other nations have taken on this goal. So to get at that, there's also just different ways to get at conserving 30% of lands and waters. And then the state of California also took it one step further by including kind of larger goals around access and stewardship. And so the three key objectives of California's 30 by 30 program are to protect and restore biodiversity, to expand access to nature, and then to mitigate and build resilience to climate change. And so there's the literal data GIS layer of 30% of our lands and waters conserves, and then these broader goals. And so to achieve both the 30% conserved as well as the broader goals, the California Natural Resource Agency, with input from a number of different coalitions and organizations across the state, identified the 10 pathways to 30 by 30. And so these are to accelerate regionally led conservation. So the work that East Bay Parks is doing in partnership with Together Bay Area and other organizations, to execute strategic land acquisition, to increase voluntary conservation easements, to enhance conservation of existing public lands and coastal waters. So taking what we have protected and building out the biodiversity and making it more restored to its native habitat, to institutionalize advanced mitigation, to expand and accelerate environmental restoration and stewardship, to strengthen coordination among governments, to align investments to maximize conservation benefits, advance and promote complementary conservation measures, and evaluate conservation outcomes and adaptive management. And I read those out loud because a number of these align with the East Bay Park's mission and vision and our goals. So it's definitely a program that we can work in strong partnership with the state to achieve. Looking specifically at the section of the report on the San Francisco Bay Area, we wanted to highlight that we are being turned to. You can see that there's interest for free and reduced park entrance fees and programs, interest for transportation to natural areas and urban areas, including Oakland and Richmond, which are in the East Bay, educating youth about green jobs and career opportunities. So as one of the largest employers of youth in the San Francisco Bay Area, this is a great goal for the Park District to help the state achieve. And then to complete regional trail systems, including the Ridge Trail, the Bay Trail, and others that we currently operate and manage and are striving to expand. So as the state is striving to implement this program, we also know funding comes with the implementation goals. And so on the government affairs side, we are tracking where those funding opportunities are. And we'll talk about the current state budget in a few slides. But before we get there, I wanted to share with our committee members what the Park District's actions have been to date. So we do participate on a regional collaborative working group to help provide input on the guidelines. So a 30 by 30 working group. Assistant General Manager Christina Kelchner has been participating with Together Bay Area. We also participate on their policy committee, which looks at 30 by 30 frequently. We provided a comment letter on the Pathways report. So the draft Pathways report was released a few months back, and planning, stewardship, and others contributed to a cross-divisional letter. And thank you to Legislative Assistant Flora Chantos for coordinating that letter. It was about 3 pages, and we'd be happy to share the full one with the board. I'm sure you received it in your packet, but we can highlight it again. And then most recently, we hosted an event at Roberts Regional Recreation Area with the California Natural Resources Agency, celebrating the Pathways report and the shared vision of what it can achieve for the state of California. And so you can see that is pictured in the tweet on the left-hand side of your screen. And then looking at the governor's May revise, we want to talk about some of the investment areas. So for clarity, there's no 30 by 30 grant program. There's no sort of specific cutout in the budget. It's that the organizations in support of 30 by 30 are supporting a variety of investments to help achieve those pathway goals, those 10 pathways that we discussed. And so a couple of different areas in the May revise that we're seeing some investments are in the climate investments. And so I do want to highlight 50 million one-time funding for State Coastal Conservancy acquisition. There's also funding for drought resilience and response and nature-based climate solutions. On the wildfire resilience front, we're seeing a significant amount of money to reduce the risk of catastrophic wildfires. And we're also really excited to see increased funding for CAL FIRE staffing and fire crews, specifically looking at additional California conservation crews. So both adding, I believe, 6 or 8 new crews and then taking existing seasonal crews and turning them into year-round crews. For equitable access, we're seeing $83.5 million invested into just a variety of programs, including picking up a state park pass at your local library, new visitor center infrastructure, and then we're also seeing $500 million for active transportation funding. And so that's just a real quick, brief update on the 30 by 30 goals, the report, and just the overall vision and how it relates to the May revise. And with that, I'll turn it to Eric if he has any additional comments, and then we'll take some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. And really good framing to say that there is no specific 30 by 30 program. It's our understanding, and Doug can certainly chime in if there's anything misunderstood about it, is that most of the funding to achieve the goals of 30 by 30 will be coming through existing programs so that the money can move through quickly. So there's not a separate grant program that we need to fight to be eligible for. It'll be more existing programs. There is a designation of land and a definition of that under conservation that applies to mostly to lands that are pretty like our preserves and our wilderness areas, and not sort of the more recreation areas. So there is some the definition there doesn't apply to all of our parks, but that doesn't mean we can't achieve resources and secure funding for all of our parks through the budget process and the existing programs. And the only other thing I'd like to just say is that it was just a really lovely event at Roberts. The secretary and his deputy, Jennifer Norris, really were there in listening mode. And we had probably about 30 NGOs and nonprofit representatives, land trust representatives that really spoke very eloquently about how to achieve some of these goals and some of the tools that they would need now that the Pathways document has been released. And the resources team had folks taking notes and were taking back the feedback. So it was really a kind of an inspiring meeting. And I did want to thank Flora Santos for helping to arrange the meeting along with the resources staff. And then obviously Deputy General Manager Ana Alvarez, who made the initial contact with the resources agency. So all in all, it was a very productive meeting, and the secretary really enjoys coming to our park, so we need to get him here more often.
Great. Thank you. This is a wonderful report. Very exciting. Lots of good opportunities for us and for the state. So it's great. Director Lane?
Okay. I keep wanting to press the wrong mute button. When you talk about the pathways and the items that were listed here, are those things that you extracted and put into this report then that are congruent with our 30 by 30?
Correct. So those are
Okay.
10 pathways that are identified in the 30 by 30 report document.
Okay. And, I think that's not a bad idea, because you look and you see new legislation, which again reiterates things which 4 other pieces, successful or not, have listed. So I hope we can work with this well. And then I was just curious about when they were at Roberts, where exactly did they gather? Did they gather up at the picnic tables not far from the recreation area, or out in the forest, or where were they?
They were at some picnic tables. Flora, can you share with us the exact picnic site?
The which site?
The picnic site. So Flora will.
Yeah, that are
Folks
up
hear
on
me?
okay.
Hello, committee members. Flora Chuntosh, legislative assistant. The attendees gathered at the Bay Vista picnic area, which is right next to the baseball diamond, and it was requested that there be a nice vista nearby to inspire the conversation. And there's 2 incredible vistas right near there. So, and it was surrounded by redwoods. You can somewhat see in the tweet the redwood area. It was, I agree with what our chief said. It was really lovely, and there was really a historic nature to the conversation.
Okay, that's good. I remember when they took down some of those trees. Do you remember that, Dennis? And people said, "You're doing what?" And it was this wonderful view that opened up. Thanks.
Great. Director Waspy, did you have any comments or questions?
Just thank you for the report, and I'm really excited about this. I understand it's a big plan, so there's no plan. And when we use words like, what was it, transformative programs to deal with climate, when I hear transformative, do we get any credit for doing it? Because every piece of land we buy is in fact supporting the governor's goals. I mean,
Right.
Did Director Crowfoot indicate that he pat us on the head saying we're doing good and here's a bunch of money, or did he just I think we would fit right into the plan, and I think we should really take advantage of that, because if there is no plan, we can create one for them very easily by showing them what our land department does.
Absolutely. So Secretary Crowfoot did share accolades for the Park District's work for providing access for urban communities to open space. Unfortunately, the Park District lands currently are not accounting for the level that we were expecting to see of the state's 30% conserved because of the level of access. So it is a balance between access and then sort of preservation. And the California Natural Resources Agency, for the literal 30%, are counting highly preserved areas, sort of the untouched nature, the ecosystem, the wildlife corridors. So we are not counting towards the 30%, but we are seen as a partner in achieving those broader pathway goals. And then additionally, we are working with our planning team to continue to submit our GIS layers for further consideration, because areas such as like our habitat conservation, HCP, NCCP should all be counted. And so you imagine the state of California, the governor put into action that executive order, wanted things done quickly. The state administration is now having to go through and sift through layers and layers of data to get everything accounted for. So we're working on both fronts. We're working to secure that funding to achieve the broader vision goals. And then we are working with staff directly to have more of the park district's lands count towards the 30% and sharing our data layers with them to have that happen, because it's definitely a great deal of reconciliation that the state's having to do right now to look at every single acre of land in California.
Well, yeah, and especially with the Habitat Conservancy, I mean, by definition, we can only develop 1% of that, the land that we get, or the percentage that they put in, or whatever it is. It seems like the definition of preserving habitat and land, so.
Absolutely. So we are working to make sure that that's counted.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much for your report. And yeah, I'm glad you're pursuing both making sure that everything that we have already done that should qualify is qualified. And also really, I fully agree with Dennis that, yeah, when there's not a concrete plan and concrete buckets, there's certainly a great opportunity to help shape that going forward and provide good ideas. So thank you. I look forward to that as well. Okay, so I don't see Brian. Are we doing the local issues, actions taken by other jurisdictions?
I believe maybe Tanya is here to present on that.
Oh, great. Hi, Tanya. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Let me go ahead and share my screen. Could one of the secretaries guide me? So all of a sudden now I don't see my, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. Are we good now?
Looks good.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Eccles, Director Waspy, and Director Lane. Thank you for having me here today. Tanya Covarrubias, planner in the Acquisition, Stewardship, and Development Division. Today, planning has 3 local items I'll present on. The first one here is Contra Costa County Board of Supervisors is considering an appeal of the Planning Commission's November 2021 approval of E-Group's application to rezone a 77-acre property to be included in the solar energy generation combining district. Our second item is the Iron House Sanitary District. On May 3rd, the Board of Supervisors considered the new use evaluation and approved Montezuma Water to pursue further analysis of proposed new land use on Jersey Island. And our third item is East Bay Muds. On February 28th of this year, they prepared a notice of preparation for a draft EIR for the Walnut Creek Water Treatment Plant pre-treatment project. So I'll go over our first item here. So in March of this year, the Park District submitted a formal appeal of the Plan Commission's November 2021 approval of the E-Group's application and to proceed with CEQA analysis of the solar project to establish a 6.5 megawatt capacity facility. The subject property identified here in this map in red is a 77-acre property located near the western terminus of Byron Hot Springs Road, approximately 1.25 miles southeast of Vasco Road and near Vernal Pools. Actually today, probably right about now, our Chief of Planning, GIS and Trails, Brian Holt, is presenting to the Board of Supervisors the Park District's basis for appealing the Planning Commission's 2021 decision. The appeal is based on the following. First item is that it conflicts with the general plan policies. It also conflicts with county adopted solar generation policy. It also conflicts with the East Contra Costa County Habitat Conservation Plan, and significant impacts would be to biological resources. Our second item is Iron House Sanitary District proposed land use on Jersey Island. On May 3rd, the Iron House Sanitary District's board approved the potential new use of Jersey Island, allowing further analysis and study, but subject to further approvals with the following requirements. Contra Costa County and the City of Oakley and the Sanitary District shall negotiate and enter into a memorandum of understanding regarding the annexation of Jersey Island, and Jersey Island shall be added to the City of Oakley's sphere of influence. The second requirement would be Montezuma and the Sanitary District will need to amend the partner agreement to address anticipated land approvals, disposition and cost sharing, and proposed terms for a lease option to purchase agreement. The last requirement would be if the MOU and amendment to the partner agreement are not approved, Montezuma would not be authorized to pursue the potential new uses. Excuse me. So the above conceptual land use plan includes various improvements, including wildlife and habitat refuge, up to 450 single-family homes, recreational amenities, a hotel, retail space, and wind and solar production, just to name a few. This item was actually presented on the May 17th, 2022 Board of Directors meeting as part of General Manager's comments as our actions of other jurisdictions. Just a little bit of history of this. The Park District did complete a feasibility study back in 2009, which shows our interest of recreational opportunities here on Jersey Island, such as trails and possibly campground areas. And our last item is East Bay Mud's Walnut Creek Water Treatment Plant pre-treatment project. In March of 2022, a notice of preparation of an environmental impact report for the Walnut Creek Water Treatment Plant pre-treatment project was posted. The project's located off of Larkey Lane in Walnut Creek, adjacent to Acalanes open space. This project proposes to construct additional facilities at the plant in 2 different phases to treat lower quality untreated water resulting from high rainfall rainfall runoff, wildfires, future droughts, algae blooms, climate change, and emerging contaminants. This project would also improve treated water taste and odor. The impacts here would actually be to the Briones to Mount Diablo Regional Trail. These impacts would only occur during the construction phase, which is anticipated from 2027 to 30, when equipment would be moving back and forth from our trail, which is pretty much on the northwestern corner of the project site. The Park District holds a trail license for that area that expires in 2030. So Park District staff were contacted by East Bay Mud staff and met with them and able to discuss the project and the impacts to the trail. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions. But if not, our chief, Brian Holt, would be happy to explain further details. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tanya, for your presentation. Very, very helpful, very interesting. Do any of the committee members have questions? Director Lane or Director Waspy?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your report, Tanya. And I don't know if you go deep enough in the weeds for this like Brian would, but I guess on the solar energy generation approval by the supervisors and us appealing it, do you happen to know, or does your staff happen to know where the Sierra Club weighed in on this?
I do not. I do know that Save Mount Diablo also submitted their appeal, and I believe they will probably be speaking at the Board of Supervisors meeting that is going on right now still. So I'm unsure.
All right, thank you.
Sorry.
Director Waspy, I think the Sierra Club has a national policy to not oppose solar projects, which is surprising, but I think they have a national policy to support solar in all instances. And I know Director Coffey has been working on that issue, and we can report more about that offline if you want.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, I can add something to that. I think that local Sierra clubs who might want to take a more nuanced approach have been disciplined by the national board. And so in the letter that our executive committee sent, they were very tactful about how they had doubts about this particular solar installation. It's a very interesting letter to read, however, because I know, spent a lot of time thinking about it and how to address it. And I had the experience of talking to one of the planning commissioners some months ago. It was a 4-3 vote to approve it, which is now why it has the appeal. And he said, well, he didn't think the planning commission should tell developers what they should do, which I thought was a kind of a new concept to me. And so I think the discussion today is going to be an interesting one. And there will be several representatives there. So and I think the ironic thing is that we had been asking Alameda County to set up a solar policy that would help respond to the, requests in the Tassajara Valley. And Contra Costa County about 8 months ago did set up such a policy. So there is a location where these solar facilities could go, and it is not this location, which is, right in the middle of our plans with HCP in the southern part of the county. So it would be an interesting case study for someone, I would think. And then I have a small question on Jersey Island. Do you have anything else, Dennis?
No.
So the Jersey Island boundaries, do they entirely abut the park, our Big Break water and boundaries? I'm just wondering how close they come to us.
They come, I believe, very close, right there at the southern southeast tip there. But I would have to defer to Brian Holt to give you those details. I'm sorry.
Okay, and so the way it is looking, does it seem likely that Oakley will be supporting that much density on the island?
I do not know. I'm sorry. I can definitely have Brian get back to you with those answers.
Yeah, I think we've all seen developments on various Delta Islands with levees, which are not new, and thought about climate change with regard to these changes on the islands there in the Delta. But thank you. I really appreciate having a SAGE report as part of this committee. So thanks.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Very much appreciate the information. And yeah, I also am glad that we've added this local issues updates to the committee, because I think it's important to be aware of all of the different things that are happening that impact us. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, so next we have item 3, which is the funding and grants update.
And I believe that Deborah, Katie's it.
Katie and Deborah, I think, are both here.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Katie Hornbeck, Grants Manager. Deborah is here because I'm actually sitting out in front of Coyote Hills right now, getting ready to do a site visit for a grant application we submitted with State Parks. So Deborah's here in case I got to jet off. So
And I can share the screen too for you, Katie, when you're ready.
Yeah. So in the ledge packet, there was the report that we provide that shows the applications that we've submitted in the last since the last meeting. So I think this one is from early March to beginning of May, and then as well as any grants that have been awarded in that same time period. The only thing that I wanted to point out in the grants applied section, the 2 applications that were submitted to National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. One was for the Ferry Point Pier project, and then the other for Coyote Hills. Both of those are what they call pre-proposals, and we should be finding out in the next week if we've been invited to submit a full application. And then for grants awarded, I was just at the board meeting last week and presented on the mitigation from the outside agency. That was the Lane Partners real estate development mitigation funding that we got approved from the board of directors last week. So I'm happy to answer any other questions related to this report or anything else related to grants at this time.
Great. Thank you very much, Katie. Deborah, did you have anything you wanted to add, or we just go to member questions now?
I think we can just go to member questions.
Great. Thank you. Director Waspy, Director Lane.
I just appreciated the report that you provided for the board. You know, I guess it was last week. That was very helpful to me, and it really is more of an art than a science, from what I could see. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lane.
And thank you, Katie. I guess the only question I would have is seems like we're doing really well in the wildfire risk mapping grants. I think you had mentioned that when you gave your presentation that we were going to try to get some help or buy-in from our neighbors like East Bay Mud and maybe some of the other water agency that share land with us, because we'll obviously be doing their land also. Are you still working on that or having any success or any update?
Yes, Dina Robertson has actually been really the lead on reaching out to those agencies and talking about our project and getting support. I'm not sure if it'll be at the next board meeting, but sometime in June or July, we'll be coming to the board for approval to go into a cooperative funding agreement with Alameda County Flood Water Control District Zone 7 for $50,000 for this project. So it's very similar to the same agreement we got approved to enter into with East Bay Mud. So those are the 2 that are, secured for all intents and purposes. And then I'd have to check with Dina to see who else she's reached out to and if there's anything else sort of, in the pipeline.
All right. Well, I don't want to be presumptuous, but, a lot of us on the board have really close relationships with some of the elected members of those agencies. And if you stumble, I would think that somebody could maybe put a little guilt on them because they share the wildland with us, and should share the responsibility also.
I will let Dina know that we've got support from the board.
Great.
All right.
Great. Thank you. Thanks very much, Katie. And thanks especially for dropping in from where you are off the road there.
I think Katie's been on many site visits. There's a Crown Beach site visit later today, and she's also been out with state parks at Miller Knox and Del Val recently. So
Great. Well, that's
Yeah.
good. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you for showing off our parks for the state and
Mhm.
every other potential funder.
All righty. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Okay, Eric or Lisa, were you going to introduce the next item with our advocate briefings, or should we just jump into it?
I think we can just jump into it. Both Peter and Doug are here. So Peter, if you want to go ahead and kick it off, we're all ears.
Thank you. Thought I'd start off talking about some policy and legislative matters. Also, how offices are actually working at federal agencies and in Congress now as things open up, but barely open up. And then give you one brief update on the reconciliation bill and remaining legislative items that Congress is really trying to work through and pass this year. I'll go back to where Lisa left off with America the Beautiful and the initiative there, also called 30 by 30. On May 6th, you may have seen the White House released a press release talking about some things that have been done to date since they started this initiative. They expect to release an atlas or showing, identifying areas that have been conserved. It's been much anticipated, and they're doing a lot of collaboration and conversations with states and tribes and many other stakeholders, but this is supposed to be released in December. Specifically, the Park District is tracking closely this America the Beautiful challenge grant that was recently announced. It's basically half and half. Half the money is federal funding, the other half would be private funding. That specific program we have gone through, it doesn't look like it fits nicely with the Park District, but there could be some additional grants that come out of this initiative. And so we're tracking this closely and looking for opportunities for the Park District can apply. So I just wanted to make sure that the board was aware of that. Going back to what Director Waspy was saying earlier, the America the Beautiful and 30 by 30 is really what the agencies are doing and already, and what the Park District is already doing and does on a daily basis. When you see press releases and announcements made, it's what NOAA does on a daily basis. It's what the Park Service does on a daily basis, what the Forest Service does, the Fish and Wildlife Service does. It just happens to be the brand by which things are being highlighted or being touted. So, you know, when you hear of the bipartisan infrastructure law, or you hear of the Land and Water Conservation Fund, those announcements are often put under the rubric of America the Beautiful, or working towards achieving our 30 by 30 goal at a federal level, but taking credit for things that are happening within these existing programs. So just wanted to make sure people were aware of that. There's also a lot of talk about getting some lands bills passed and some water bills dealing with the drought passed. The challenge is always getting agreement between both parties about you know, what could be part of a package or legislative set of bills that could pass at the end of the year. It's been difficult to get those bills approved on a bipartisan basis. Some are happening, but there is a lot of, best word to put it is, electioneering, posturing already happening let's just not have anything pass is what some members believe, and wait until next year and maybe we'll have more leverage and we'll get what we want. I've always seen, though, in an election year that there's a lot of environmental legislation that does come together because members want to be able to show what they're doing and to take credit for things. But it's a very slow process at the moment. We're not in a lot of bills, a lot of hearings about bills, but not a lot of, legislative action, meaning committees are moving and bills are moving. There's agreement. There's not agreement to do a big land and water bill set of bills yet. That could happen, but as you might gather, because of the political environment we're in, it's been challenging. There's not been a lot of talk about the Civilian Conservation Corps, or sometimes referred to as the Civilian or the Climate Corps. That could come back on the radar if these talks on the Build Back Better reconciliation bill accelerate. But it has been a quiet conversation to date about since about December, really, where there has not been a lot of talk about the Civilian Conservation Corps and additional money for that program. So just wanted to give you a flavor. There was a question, I think, by Director Lane last time about what bipartisan bills are happening or moving. One bill is the Recovering America's Wildlife Act. And that bill has a lot of support in both the House and the Senate, bipartisan support, in fact. But it's taken 5, almost 6 years to get to this point. It's similar in that it has been a coalition of a broad group of stakeholders going back 6 years. There was a report done back in 2016 that recommended $1.3 billion for really to help states conserve, restore, and protect wildlife and habitat. And there's already an existing program called the Pittman-Robertson Act that gets about $1 billion per year through excise taxes of sporting goods, and then the states get that money. So this new program called RAWA, you may have heard about or seen some emails about it, is would provide 1.3 billion per year to states and 97 million per year to tribes for that purpose of protecting wildlife and habitat. Question is, how is it paid for? And there has not been an agreement yet reached with the bill sponsors about precisely how it's paid for. Senate has a lot of momentum with 32 co-sponsors. The House has 177 co-sponsors for their bill. So this is a space to watch, because you could see some other land and water bills be attached to this bill if it moves, but there's a real desire to try and get this passed this year. So there's also, you may have heard about another bill that is getting more attention, that is America Competes Act. It deals with the semiconductor crisis that we're facing right now, but it also deals with a variety of other trade matters. That's another bill that it's high on the priority list of the Congress to try and get done. They're hoping to reach agreement by July 4th, but just want to give you a couple examples of bills that have some momentum behind them, and members are really trying to reach agreement on soon. Because it's an election year, there's a lot of desire to try and do a lot of work in the June and July timeframe. So we'll keep folks up to date. Just to backtrack for a second, what's it like to go into a congressional office? What's it like to go into a federal agency right now? I thought I'd just give you a brief snapshot, and that is, when you go to a congressional office, you need to set up an appointment. You need to be escorted in and out of wherever you're meeting. Most of the time, you're required to wear a mask. Staff are required, or offices are required, to sign you in. There are few cafeterias that are open, but it is tends to be fairly vacant. Just when you can go a week where you see more people if you go into a building, and then it's quiet the next because COVID still seems to be rearing its ugly head from week to week. It is now spiked again back here and is impacting offices as well as people. As things start to open back up, it was probably likely to happen, but it's made it difficult for people personally and professionally to try and get work done as the new variants continue to pop up. There's no official announcement of when things will really open back up. Part of it is COVID. The other part is there's not enough security. And there's been a lot of retirements within the Capitol Police. So it's limited access for now. And when you go to a committee hearing, they're not, it's only, you can only watch it virtually, only unless you're a witness or you in the room. And so committee hearings are happening and legislation is being edited and changed at these committee meetings with members around a dais, some wearing masks, some not. But sometimes committee meetings in Congress are happening virtually. So it just depends on, and some members, they'll limit the number of members that are in a committee room. So some senators or representatives will be in their office and some will be actually in the committee room. In agencies, in short, there are a lot of the political appointees and leaders of various agencies and bureaus in the office. There's not as many career officials in the agencies. Many are working virtually. And so this has been a source of tension, source of frustration, and a source of excitement, depending on who you talk to about being back in the office. Some agencies require people, to be back in the office 1 day, 2 days, 3 days a week, or people are choosing to do that. But it has been, it just varies from agency to agency. And again, it's very quiet once you enter the building because there's not that many people depending on the agency you're visiting. There's also a realization that time is short with trying to do various policies and regulations. And because people haven't been around a table, you can imagine sometimes that's a quick way to get things done. And because people haven't been, sometimes things take longer, but people have found virtual meetings to be as efficient or more efficient. I do get the sense in talking to many career officials in some of the key bureaus that people are frustrated and are not being fully utilized. And I think that's a result of this last 2 years. I hope it changes, but just seeing people in the last couple of weeks, there's a sense of wanting to help, but not being asked. So one other topic I wanted to cover, Port Chicago exoneration. Representative Salme introduced a House concurrent resolution, and that was introduced on July 16th, 2021. He has 17 co-sponsors for that resolution. It has been strongly encouraged that the Park District and others speak with Senators Feinstein and Padilla in support of this resolution. Version of this resolution was a part of the defense authorization bill that Representative DeSaulnier got in the House version. It did not make it through in last year's defense authorization bill. So happy to talk more about that, but that's definitely an easy thing for us to do because we've been in communication in the past with their office on this topic, but more formal letters are needed at this time. Happy to talk more about that. Just overall, I would say that it's a challenging time because people think about democracy and think about the war in Ukraine right now. And then there's other issues such as the elections, inflation, supply chain issues, and energy and environment issues, and any number of other topics that are before policymakers right now. And there is a real sense of pressure and desire to try and do everything. Yet it's hard sometimes when you're not all back in the office, when you have to have face-to-face discussions about these really challenging issues that you're facing as a policy official. So, and with the elections, you know, the primary is already happening. The elections top of mind for members of Congress and for the administration. The desire to try and move these things in the near future is front and center. There's a desire to try and pass a COVID assistance bill. And that is stalled. Hopefully it'll be picked back up again in early June, but that has been a source of focus also for the Congress. Last two things I'll mention is the bipartisan infrastructure law. The implementation has gone pretty well. Most observers believe that 110 billion has been issued or released so far. 4,300 projects have been announced. So with that smooth rollout comes, you know, hope that there is growth and movement towards a Build Back Better agreement. The question is that in May, June, or July, or is that in September? These negotiations have gone very quiet for a variety of reasons I won't go into, except to say that there's a hope that the bill would include pieces related to clean energy, related to prescription drugs, but also address deficit, as Senator Manchin has said is a high priority for him. So there's been 2 meetings that Senator Schumer has had with Senator Manchin the last couple of weeks. Those are showing progress, but there's not agreement yet on a time frame for getting to yes. There's been good discussions about the scope and scale of what they're talking about. Again, Civilian Conservation Corps has not come up in these recent discussions. So fingers crossed, but there's real appetite to try and get to yes on a bill. But you know, the Congress has done a lot already, and many members are talking about things that are passed or accomplishments and funds that have been released in the infrastructure bill. So there's primaries happening today in Georgia and Alabama. There are, let's see, 55 retirements in the House and 7 retirements in the Senate. So happy to answer questions, and I'll stop.
Great, thank you, Peter, very much for the report. A lot going on. Okay, do any of our committee members, Director Lane or Director Waspy, have any specific questions? Director Lane?
I assume that you know come June 7th, we'll have the start of a different congressional delegation, because we did have some big changes in our congressional districts. So we're all looking at that, and you might keep in mind some ways we could be communicating, particularly with ones that are new. I think Garamendi has a very good chance of winning that new congressional seat, which is in northern Contra Costa County. And he has represented part of the county in the past, some years ago. So
it's a great point, Director Lane. He's been very, very helpful on all things related to special districts and trying to bring that visibility to the issue. through introducing legislation that he has led in the House, but also being a friend of the Park District for a very long time. He also sits on the Armed Services Committee, and I think the 6th or 7th most senior member on the committee now. So he again can be helpful in a conference when Port Chicago comes up too. So I'm encouraging Representative DeSaulniers' staff to continue to seek out friends in conference too.
Okay, well, that would be really very helpful. And so maybe you and Eric can have some discussions about how to proceed well with that, because everyone's looking at all kinds of possibilities now. And I think this may be the year, which we've said before, of course. Thank you.
Great. Director Wasby?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for your report, Peter. Sounds a little depressing to me, but anyway, and this is a stretch. I know it's early in the day, in a big stretch. Do you happen to know what's going on? You know, fire-wise, we're starting to have wildland fires already in the Bay Area. And we have a shortage here of firefighters in the Regional Park District. CAL FIRE, I don't know how they're doing, but I just read an article about the National Forest Service who had some phenomenal drop, and people are just quitting because they don't make any money. And I think they get $15 an hour. I'm told, and I could be wrong, did I interpret it correctly, that the House and the Senate agreed to a bill to pay them a decent wage, but it's floundering somewhere. Do you know anything about that?
I'm almost positive that there was an increase made in last year's omnibus bill to address part of this lack of low pay for Forest Service forest fires. But I will get back to you, Director Wasby, on if there's something more that you need. I will say this: the Forest Service nationally suspended prescribed fire until September. And this is partially due to the wildfire that continues to grow in New Mexico. Wildfires are obviously top of mind for every aspect of the federal government right now. And, it's a year-round issue for all of us, but that's a big announcement. I shared that with the staff yesterday. So it doesn't come as a complete surprise because of various governors and elected officials that are weighing in, but we know it's an important tool to address the wildfire threats. So I will get back to you on your question if there's more there, but I know a lot of firefighters in the recent years have left Forest Service and joined CAL FIRE or jumped to other states because of the pay and the hours.
All right. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks
Yeah,
very much.
really quick to that, Director Eccles. I heard last week, and I took part in some roundtable discussion that the Forest Service is only staffed up to about 70% at this juncture, and that CAL FIRE is only at 80%. So got a long ways to go and make sure that those entities are up and running come fire season.
Yeah, thank you for flagging that. It's very concerning. Okay, Peter, thank you so much for your report. Very interesting and helpful, and we really appreciate all the good work you're doing. And so if there isn't anything else, we will. Oh, Eric has his hand up. Okay.
Yeah, I just had a quick question, Peter. Of the 55 retirements, can you provide a partisan breakdown on that?
Sure. So 33 Democrats and 22 Republicans. And in the Senate, 1 Democrat and 6 Republicans. So it's just historically, just to give you a quick perspective, in the House, it's usually around 30 or so retirements. It's kind of split evenly. This year, it just happens to be more. variety of reasons. But so usually around 30. This year it's 55. Don't think there'll be too many more due to the districts have now been kind of decided.
Okay. All right. Good question. Thank you, Peter. I think we're ready for Mr. Houston. Doug, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Thank you so much, Chair Eccles, Directors Waspy and Lane. Doug Houston, your state advocate. So I'll give you a snapshot of for where we're at in the legislative cycle right now. And last week, the third house, that's us lobbyists, we endured, some better, some worse, what is referred to as Suspense File Day. Director Eccles, you familiar with the term?
Yes. Yeah.
So this is it's like a mysterious, very arcane nomenclature that applies to California very specifically. Any bills, when they come out of the policy committee, have to go through appropriations. Any bills identified as having a hit to the general fund of $120,000 or more are then placed on the appropriations suspense file. And then they're later acted on, which was on Thursday, and it's largely predicated on the relative strength or weakness of our revenues at the time, snapshot of our revenues at the time. Obviously, we're doing quite well. A lot of bills did make it off, but it's a really, they call it sort of the black box. The bills go in, some come out, and there's no logic behind it. And they give appropriations staff unilateral authority to amend the bill as they see fit, without any consultation with stakeholders, staff, the member staff. So that was last Thursday. Fast forward this week, we are in deadline week. So what does that mean? All the all the bills that were introduced in their original house need to be out, passed, advanced, transferred by the end of this week over to the opposite house. And it's a busy, busy week because those folks, the Senate and the Assembly right now, are in the throes of processing roughly 1,000 bills. So they're going to be spending a lot of late night hours here. I know the Assembly was here quite late last night. Just again, processing these things. So we can talk about the budget and the May revise. So our May revise in the budget is roughly $300 billion. We're aware that we have a $95 billion surplus, and of that, about 40 billion-ish is discretionary. It can be spent outside of Prop 98, the confines of Prop 98 and Prop 2. So while it's terrific to have this embarrassment of riches, we're really facing some significant challenges in how to spend those monies, because I've used invoked the term, the GAM limit before. So essentially that's a really prehistoric initiative. I think it was adopted right around the same time Prop 13. And essentially it said that expenditures in the state cannot exceed population growth and inflation. So we've had, inflation, obviously, we're at whatever, 6 to 8% the CPI, but our population's been very stagnant. So what can we do as a state? What are legislators doing as a state to avoid pulling that the trigger on the GAN limit? What they can do is send the money back to taxpayers, which the governor is proposing via $400 per vehicle rebate. Money can be redirected back to schools to bolster school spending, but we're seeing across the state that, one, the schools are flush with money, and two, we're almost in a declining enrollment situation kind of across the state. So that's not making a whole lot of sense. So what are they turning to? Similar to last year, they're turning to one-time capital improvement expenditures. And in this governor's budget, what he's proposing, between those expenditures and the money that's going in the surplus, it's representative of about 94% of the surplus. So transitioning over to the budget itself and the deliberation status, what I learned last week, I had a conversation with the pro tem's Director of Policy for Natural Resources, Kip Lipper, and this year is going to be very unique as far as I can remember, in that budget items went through a subcommittee process. They were vetted, not terribly transparent, but they were vetted. And generally speaking, usually they are then elevated to the full conference committee. This year, they're not going to have a conference committee. Everything is going to be done sort of behind closed doors between leadership and the administration. So I don't know if that's good. I don't know if that's bad. Hopefully, we're positioned in a lot of different ways with members' requests that, we prevail at the end of the day, but it is what it is. On some of the investments, I think generally speaking, climate, nature-based related investments, folks are pretty disappointed in the May revise. Wasn't a whole lot of new money made available for nature-based solutions in 30 by 30. Understandably, the focus this year and where the governor's elected to direct some of the money is toward drought. Interestingly, of the $2 billion he's proposing for drought, $500 million is to be made available for surface storage in 2025. I think that has the environmental community a little bit up in arms, but obviously, surface storage, new surface storage might need to be part of the solution, climate solution going forward. So he's taking a bold step on the front. Lisa had done a nice job of sort of identifying some of the money in this budget, including $768 million for 30 by 30 and nature-based solutions. It's gonna fund a suite of programs. A lot of money is going to the WCB. A lot of money is going to go to the state conservancies. There's money for the urban greening program, and then importantly for us, the State Coastal Conservancy in last year's budget secured $500 million. This year, $350 million will be available, then $150 going forward. And then Lisa identified $500,000 for active transportation. I think it's going to be, that's an additive sum to the May revise. It's going to be in excess of $1 billion for active transportation. What I'm a little unclear on and about is how that money is going to flow. Will it be available for projects that are already in the queue, or are they going to go through new grant cycles? And I'm hearing the former, but we'll just have to wait and see. There's been a couple budget requests forwarded for just an FYI for the statewide park program. We have secured grants through that program for park poor communities. And there's also an additional request for recreational trails, National Service recreational trails for $50 million. And that's coming through the assembly side. It's going to be subject to a lot of negotiation, a lot of money. And I think what it's going to come down to largely is if legislators are willing to be disciplined enough and actually direct money for programmatic efforts or for direct member requests. And in that it is a campaign and election year, I think they're probably going to trend toward making sure that their districts are taken care of, but we'll just wait and see. The Senate put together their own package of asks around climate, 30 by 30, very high level, not a lot of detail, but they're asking for an additional $500 million toward 30 by 30 nature-based solutions. They're asking for almost $700 million for the state conservancies, and I don't know if that includes the Coastal Conservancy or not. Presumably in that Senator Wajkowski sits on sub 2. I think that he would want to make sure that the Coastal Conservancy is getting another tranche of money. There's also $200 million for outdoor access, and that again, that's a little unclear what that means to me. Exactly for now, it sounds like it's going to be trails and trails developments and projects that are going to be implemented by a number of agencies across the state. But it's separate than outdoor. There's a separate $100 million for outdoor access equity. So I'm thinking maybe it's very nuanced and maybe it's very intentional that the $200 million for outdoor access will be more competitive statewide and not be driven by Cal EnviroScreen or one of those formulas. So that's all I've got for now. Any questions of the directors and the chair?
Director Waspy or Director Lane?
Yeah, well, thanks, Doug. So I guess my only question would be, when the member asked, that kind of went through the whole deal and it stays as just this nebulous deal until. So
yes.
How do they work? I mean, how does that work? When will we find out, I guess, what member asks were granted?
Yes. So the process, and it's actually pretty fluid, Dennis, frankly. But it's my understanding that the big three, Speaker Pro Tem, Governor, will agree on the basic framework of a budget. That needs to be done by June 15th. And during the course of the negotiation discussion, there will be a sum of money put forward to both houses. Here is your $500 million. Here is your $1 billion. You spend it as you see fit, Senate, Assembly. That in turn, the content of whatever's agreed to will in turn find its way in a trailer bill. That will probably surface a week later, anywhere from 3 to 7 days later. It's at that time we'll be able to get a copy of it and see how we fared. We're learning, we're hearing good things so far. And I defer to Eric and Lisa on that. But fingers crossed. I think given the size of the surplus and the urgency associated with trying to spend the surplus and get it out the door before we have an economic downturn, I think our projects are as good as any.
Thank you. And also there was some talk a few weeks ago about some of our allies crafting some legislation that would create a shoreline park on the San Francisco Bay that served an underserved community, that also took into account rehabilitating a military reservation. It seemed very nebulous, but very specific. Is there any update on that?
So I don't, you help me, and my geography is poor. I live in Auburn. So in India Basin, is there a military base over there in San Francisco on that side?
Oh, geez, somebody help me. Where's Lynn Borgo? Did we talk about this in closed session?
Yeah.
Oh, we did? Okay. So how's the weather up there, Doug? Getting in any bike riding in? I apologize. I forget what's closed session and what's not. Hope you're doing well. Great background. Thanks for all your good work. Somebody take this away from me quick.
Okay. All right. Director Lane, do you have any questions for Doug?
Yeah, well, over the years, I've been really used to conference committees. So is this new, or are they doing something dramatic to not move to a conference committee?
Yeah, no, it is new.
Okay.
It remains to be seen. I could be wrong. I was informed last week that the subcommittee process is over. And again, generally speaking, those things get elevated. All those items get elevated to conference. But I think it's going to be internalized. Sounds like it. It's going to be deliberated over by a small handful of people, which will include our representative, Nancy Skinner, obviously is chair of Senate Budget.
Okay, and then state parks. We read about the Dos Rios
Yeah.
Ranch becoming a park, and of course, for us, that brings to mind Marsh Creek. And is that listed on anybody's list as a member ask or a priority? Because when you talk about a population that needs to be served by a state park, I mean, that's 4,000 acres of a park with a completed general plan. So
was that, remind me, was that in, is the bulk of that in former Assembly Member Frazier's district?
it's Brentwood for the most part. And once upon a time it was, but I don't think recently. I think Frazier's moved away.
Right. I'm just asking because I think, unfortunately, so we have a new representative in Lori Wilson from Suisun City, the mayor. She is replaced Assemblymember Frazier, and she wasn't in on the ground floor when it comes to some of these discussions. So
Yeah,
I know.
true.
I know.
Who was the rest of East County? I think.
Is it Rebecca Arcaon?
I don't know, Lisa, do you
So
know?
I can answer that I can pull it up. But in terms of advocacy on Marsh Creek, I can confirm it's very much on our radar. We've been paying attention to it. Eric and I had a great conversation with Senator Glazier's office about what needs to be done to open a state park. Of course, opening a park we know has a number of administrative layers. And Senator Glazier's office expressed concerns because of the highly sensitive cultural material that still does need to be assessed at the site for protection, but they are supportive of it opening. We do have plans to meet with the newest Assemblymember Lori Wilson, and Marsh Creek will be on our agenda in that discussion. So I can just share it is on our radar. And of course, we have the potential Marsh Creek Trail connector to go through the park. And so if the East Bay Parks will be successful with that trail, we will also need to have a partnership with state parks to open the amenities to make sure it's a comfortable trail visit with restrooms, water bottle filling stations, et cetera. Eric, do you want to fill in anything I missed?
The only additional items are that we did have a meeting with State Parks Director. Well, by now it's probably a couple months ago, and we did raise this issue with him directly. And then we also have been working with Director Coffey on a draft letter of encouragement for opening that he can distribute to Brentwood City Council members. And we'd be happy to get you a copy of that letter. Actually, we can get the whole committee a copy of that letter. It was approved by the general manager, so it's public.
Yeah, well, it's a quite significant park, and for them to go drifting off and talking about new parks when this one, of course, is not perfectly ready, but they need to be making it ready for those populations. So who is the assembly person for Brentwood currently? I don't think it was Frazier, was it? Is it Grayson?
I believe it is in Frazier's district.
Still?
Yeah.
Huh. Well, okay, then I think we need to have a sit down with Assemblymember Wilson to talk about this.
Yep, we have it on the request list for sure.
Okay, Director Lane, did you have any other questions for?
No, those are my main two ones. Thank you.
And Director Waspy, did you have anything else you wanted to follow up on? No, you're good. Okay, Doug, I did have a question about the member asks. You mentioned it is an election year, so there might be some skewing towards the members, but I'm just wondering, would that likely only apply to the members who are up for election? Well, I guess actually in the assembly they're all up for the election, but
No.
in Senate then.
Yeah, no, they were last year there seemed to be, in terms of distributions, considerable equity. There definitely, there is a hierarchy, obviously.
Sure, yes.
So the speaker's going to get maybe a larger share, as will the pro tem. And then maybe leadership, Phil Ting, the budget chair, and then, Nancy's probably going to be treated very favorably. But years past, when we had a lot less money, that was very targeted toward competitive districts.
Mhm.
For example, what was that for not Del Val, but McCosker? Was that 3 years ago?
Oh, mhm.
I think, there wasn't a lot of money distributed at the time, and RBK got 4.5 because she was in one of those, at least it was viewed as a competitive district. And yes, I think that some of those Dems in particular that are in more competitive districts might fare slightly better.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you very much.
Sure, my
And
pleasure.
thank you. Thanks so much for your report as well. Really appreciate all
Okay.
the hard work.
Of course.
Eric, did you have anything you wanted to add before we move on? Oh, I see that Kelly Abreu has his hand up.
Yeah, Chair Eccles, I think Kelly has a public comment on this item. Kelly, do you have a public comment?
Yes, I do. There was this mention about surface storage, which means new lakes and dams and reservoirs. And they're going to capture surface water, take $500 million of it. And there's a brief passing mention that this is some bold new environmental initiative because the funds that are being used to pay for this are labeled as environmental. Well, I don't know if any of you have a lot of experience with environmental groups. I don't have a lot, but I have some. And I know that the only dam or reservoir surface storage that I've ever seen in environmental groups, not actively opposed, was Los Vaqueros. They're very right there in Contra Costa County. I think any of you guys, the environmental groups went through a lot and they ended up not opposing that. There's a lot of surface storage being discussed all over the state, new surface storage. And I have sat through so many meetings of environmental groups, which will go unnamed. And they are tearing their hair out. They are livid with rage about all this, the new surface storage that's being proposed, and they oppose all of it. As the East Bay Regional Park District, that's supposed to have some kind of an environmental ethic with everything that you do, I would I can't see how anybody can sit still for this idea of more surface storage as being somehow environmental. Now, I am open-minded. I did see Los Vaqueros, and that apparently doesn't seem to hurt the environment that much. But there has to be some doubt here about new surface storage. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
All right, so parliamentarian, wait, Dennis, you look like you want to respond. I was just actually going to ask if we're allowed to respond because I'm not sure that, well, that's certainly not our position, Kelly, but I don't want to, I know we're not supposed to respond to public comment, so. I don't know.
I just would I won't, I'll respond. I think it's in immediately a danger to us because what they're doing at Los Vaqueros is I think they got approval to raise it up. We've been having it pounded onto us for years and years and years that they want folks, the water purveyors want to raise Lake Del Val and they want to raise it 6 feet. And I think there's enough spillway room to do that, which would, we've done some reports on it. And I think if you raise Del Val 6 feet, you'd wipe out 90% of the infrastructure in Lake Del Val. So yeah, more surface storage is not going to be our friend, although I don't know what we're going to drink, but it would be it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and I did hear Doug say also that the environmental groups were up in arms about it. So I don't think this is something that we or the environmental groups would necessarily support, but I might be talking a little bit out of school here. So anyway, okay, thank you for the comment. Oops, just muted myself. Okay, so I think we can move on unless Eric had something he wanted to add.
No, and I think Lisa popped on just in case you had a question for her, but I think we're good. What I would like to ask is whether we could move to item number 4 under the program section here, because I know the executive director of the zoo has been patiently on the Zoom and would like to be respectful of his time.
So it's not. Oh, item 5, number 4. Okay, item 5,
yeah.
number 4. Okay. Yeah. Okay, sure. Yeah, I have no problem with that. And thank you. Thanks very much for joining us.
Yeah, and I will just basically introduce Nick because he knows this measure way better than I would. But I will just point out that historically we have partnered with the zoo on ballot measures, including most recently Measure FF, as well as CC and WW. So they've been a great long-term partner of the park districts, and we'd like to offer support for their upcoming measure. And so with that, Nick, if you want to just speak a little bit to, and thank you for joining us, really appreciate it. And I know you're also joining us from the road. So thank you for wading through our advocate reports. But if you'd like to speak to the measure, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Eric. Hopefully you can hear me. I am on the road here in Chicago visiting several of our partner institutions. So well, first of all, Director Eccles, Director Lane, and Waspy, thank you for the opportunity here. I wanted to give just a brief update on the Oakland Zoo, sort of take it from the discussion of the federal and the state down to really the local here in our community in terms of what the zoo is doing in Oakland. Number 2, wanted to talk to you about this measure that Eric referenced that we're trying to get on the ballot in the city of Oakland this November 2022. And as Eric mentioned, would be honored to have your support as we go forward. So just as backdrop, the zoo has had just a wonderful relationship with the East Bay Regional Park Districts over the years. Certainly our values align in terms of getting people and kids out in nature, connecting through educational programs, and certainly connecting to wildlife as well. And we have had a deep relationship with many of your past directors as well, especially directors Sutter and Seiden, and past general managers who've been very supportive of the zoo. And so in the spirit of continuing that tradition and given our connections together, wanted to seek your support here. The zoo, obviously, as you probably heard during the COVID, really the height of COVID, was struggling quite a bit. And it was, an institution similar to yourselves when we're closed. In our case, we're still spending over $1.3 million a month to feed our animals. We are shut down for 7 months and there's no revenue coming in. So there was a dark day for the zoo about 1.5 years ago. We obviously have started to rebound since then. Wonderful to see people coming back and just exhilarated to get out in nature. So now that we're open and have been for some time, we're starting to thrive again with the return of the public and certainly our animals, and looking to re-engage. And of course, this is our 100th anniversary of being in the city of Oakland, started in June 6th, 1922. And so as we go forward, we typically have received very little local support. We succeed on the backs of the admissions, on the backs of the membership, and certainly the kindness of philanthropic dollars. And so, never again do we want to be in a position like we were 1.5 years ago. So we're trying to build resiliency into our institution. And also as we build to the future, elevating a number of the programs that we already do so well, but doing more of them and expanding them into the community. So we did, just so you know, have in years past attempted to have a local tax measure. And the most recent one was in 2012 that barely missed by a few percentage points. So here we are today, looking to get on the ballot, specifically in the city of Oakland, to support a number of things. Number one, supporting our own facilities and upgrade of our animal habitats and spaces. Why with that is also important is the upgrade that we talked about, or you touched on, wildfire, climate change, of course. So building in wildfire safety into everything that we design and develop. We have also taken on a very significant role in terms of species conservation. So you've probably seen a lot of our rescues of mountain lions because of wildfires. In fact, 18 of them we've rescued in the last few years. Not just individuals that we're working with, but we are actively working with species and populations. The riparian brush rabbit, the San Joaquin River Delta, desperately trying to protect this isolated population from being endangered, working with the California condor population very actively with the new release up in Northern California with the Yurok tribe that we're a central partner to, working with the return of the wolves, a frog amphibian crisis that's happening and those species as well. So we want to be able to do more as it relates to conservation and the rescue and hopefully the rewilding of species into the future. Third, it is certainly about education and reaching more kids. We're doubling down on climate change and want to bring that, working actually right now with Oakland Unified School District on a climate literacy program. So our ability to grow that into the future is going to be critical. And then finally, the fourth aspect really is about accessibility broadly. While we are very good at protecting and saving animals, we need to bring everybody into this mix. So not just the privileged few. And so we're looking very closely of ensuring that, yes, the zoo can be an expensive place to come for a family of four. So how do we make it more accessible? Well, part of that is providing free access and looking at providing that for 10% of our audience as we go forward and building to that. So what does this look like? We just completed a signature gathering phase in the city of Oakland. We submitted to the city clerk on Monday, yesterday, to qualify to get on the ballot. So we won't know probably for a couple of months, but we certainly expect to be able to qualify. We did submit in more than the required number of signatures for verification, and that would put us on the ballot for November of this year. We're looking at a parcel tax of $68 per year per parcel, so less than $6 a month. And that would allow us to generate about $10 million. And it's a 20-year tax that we're looking at. So we're very mindful that there are a lot of issues and a lot of concerns, certainly locally, but certainly the zoo and the community that we support and work with in the city of Oakland, especially, but beyond in the region. We can add to that quality of life as we have done for the last 100 years and really elevate and build resiliency into the future, ensuring that our, certainly students and young kids are going to be tackling these issues that we've been talking during this session on climate change and so much more. So in a nutshell, that's what we're doing. I'm happy to answer a lot of questions on this. Again, the district has been very supportive in the past, took a support position back in 2012, certainly has been very supportive of our expansion of building a California trail exhibit many years ago. And so look forward hopefully to your engagement and your recommendation of support as we go forward with this potential measure that'll be on the ballot in November of this year. So with that, I will pause to see again if Eric, you needed to add anything else in. Otherwise, Director Eccles, Lane, and Waspy, happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Nick.
No, I don't really have anything to add other than the staff is recommending a support position. And I guess I should add, we've also checked with the general manager and legal counsel, and they both were supportive of a support position.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Director Waspy or Director Lane, any comments, questions on this?
Well, thank you very much for the presentation, Nick. It's good to see you again. Yeah, we do have a close relationship and also a financial one that we've helped support the zoo. This is this, the 2012 ballot measure, how much was that a request? Was that the same
Yeah,
amount?
Yeah, sorry, Director Lane, thanks for that question. So the 2012 measure was an Alameda County measure, and so the dollar was different. It was lower at that time. This is a City of Oakland only measure. So the 2012, given it was a county, was a $12 per year, and that would have generated, approximately the same as what the city would have generated back then. So we're looking at, again, just a City of Oakland this time.
So tell me about your thinking in doing that, since I think we all know the Oakland Museum draws from beyond Oakland.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, a lot of factors in that. For us, really felt this was our year, given our founding in the City of Oakland 100 years ago. We're engaged very deeply in the Oakland community and have been, certainly, as I mentioned, from the school district standpoint, the majority of our programming. Of course, we certainly have programs outside of the city, but the majority of our programming is done in the city with Oakland Unified and a number of other partner organizations that we work with. So we felt that it was certainly manageable, and our ability to do it at this point in the city would be beneficial overall. So that's why we're looking at the city. Certainly, it is a lot more effort, as you well know, to go out on a county or certainly a bi-county effort. But we felt like, given where we are with our 100th year in the city, that this was the right thing to do.
Thank you.
Director Waspy?
Yeah, well, thank you, Nick, and it's good to see you again. And boy, I'm obviously very much in support of this. I love what you've done at the zoo, and especially, since I know it was a tough battle in 2012, and it was very, very close. But once you opened that California Trail exhibit, I think you got a slam dunk. It's just so beautiful and such a great improvement. I guess the question, have you identified who would be opposed to this? I mean, when you usually go for these things, you figure out who would be opposed. There's no longer open space issues, are there? You kind of won that battle, didn't you?
Yeah, well, first of all, Director Waspy, thank you. Certainly nothing is a slam dunk these days. But the California Trail, as you mentioned, has really elevated our not only our reputation, but the quality and the respect of the work that we do to protect species in California, and the conservation work that we have increased quite significantly since that's been done. From an opposition standpoint, I will tell you, as the signature gatherers are out in the community, people love the zoo. So it was not about the zoo. They appreciated what we stood for in the community, what we do for wildlife. More than anything, it's probably just taxpayers at this point. We obviously, in the City of Oakland or just in California, taxes are a challenge. The problem is this is the only way to move forward, especially given the lack of both federal and state funding that we do receive. So at this point, we don't hear of any opposition. We are going to be going out with another voter poll to test our messages and to test our support. But at this point, the organizations that were there in the past, we're working with them as best as we can to be part of the solution overall. So in this case, there is no expansion of the zoo. I think that was the issue back in 2012. Really, this is just more about increasing our programs, increasing our access, and improving some of our existing habitats.
All right. Well, I wish you the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you very much for the presentation. And I am, excited about the goals that you have because I always want to see zoos improving the life of the animals that are there. And so I'm glad you're really working on the habitat as well as the species rescue and protection. And of course, climate change and accessibility. So all of those are great goals and appreciate the work. And my 8-year-old and I really love the zoo. So thank you for that as well. And I don't actually, as Eric knows, I don't actually like most zoos, but you guys have done a good job of really, making it as good as it can be for the animals.
Well, I would, if I may, just for another 30 seconds, let you know, and I appreciate that comment, Director Eccles, that, we are unique. There are 240 zoos that are accredited across the United States, zoos and aquariums. But this zoo in Oakland really stands up for animals. And we've always been animals first. In fact, we have very good relationship with PETA. We're one of the only zoos that they engage with. We fought the circus, as you probably know, and banned Ringling Brothers, ultimately as part of a larger effort from California. So for us, it is very much about taking care of the animals that we have, rescuing those through the illegal wildlife trade or coming in through the Port of Oakland, that we often are called upon, working with California Fish and Wildlife, that we are always called upon to support and help. So we take great pride in that, and that's what this community expects as well. So appreciate your comment there, and certainly, as I said, appreciate the overall engagement between the Park District and the values that you have and the zoo, and hopefully we can develop deeper connections in the years ahead.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. So Director Waspy or Director Lane, do we have a motion on this?
Sure, I would make that motion.
And I will second.
Great. So if our recording secretary could take the roll.
Absolutely. Chair Eccles,
Aye.
Director Lane,
Aye.
Director Waspy.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you for your patience, Nick.
Thank you, Eric.
Okay, so we're going to go back to our original order. And we've got the next up, the recommended bills to support. And I'm hoping we can move pretty quickly through these because we're already at almost 2:30 or 2:15, I guess. But yeah.
Sure, happy to go quick. The first bill has actually been held on suspense, so it's not going to advance this year. However, I do think it's worth supporting, at least in concept, because it would require refillable water bottle stations if there is a drinking water source on the site of a park or some other public facilities. So it's definitely in alignment with our stated goal on reducing plastic. If there's no questions, I can go on to the next one. In this one, we can actually.
One moment, sorry, Eric. I think Kelly has a public comment, actually.
Okay.
Kelly, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah. So we're talking about accessible water refill stations. Well, I'm going to just go back to the water refill station that I know very well and love. In fact, I visited it this morning and sent you a picture of what it looks like as of this morning. I don't want it to be outdated picture or anything. And what happened was, the question was, well, when we talk about accessible water drinking stations, refill drinking stations, I'd like them to be detectable, detectable as in locatable, as in findable, okay? And so when I asked for that, I said, there ain't no signs on the thing that say drinking water. Well, lo and behold, a sign showed up, and it's a joke. It's a joke because it's about 1 inch diameter. The round little thing. So if you find the spigot and then bring your microscope or your telescope and your reading glasses, or maybe your magnifying glass, you'll be able to figure out that it is drinking water because they put a little teeny weeny little sign on there, and it is a joke. I'm wondering if they intended it as a joke or whatever. But if you still read the sign, the map on the restroom, it still says there's no drinking water. If you read the paper maps, it says there may not be any drinking water in the park, and it doesn't show the location on the map So none of the maps have the location of the drinking water. That's what I mean when I talk about detectable, locatable, findable. And let's not, the sense of humor when you put up a 1.5 inch diameter drinking water logo, that I fail to find the humor in that. I really do. I find it, this is not a joking matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
And then on the next bill, AB 2362, I believe that was gutted and amended and now refers to water quality control boards being able to accept funds, external funds to update their plans. I think Doug's still on. Do I have that right? Because if it is amended like that, I would probably recommend we not take action on the bill.
I think, Eric, that was additive language. I'm looking at it right now. I do believe that the provisions that are greatest interest to us remained in the bill.
Okay. Well, the piece of main interest, excuse me, is essentially to look at our permitting processes in the state so that we can do our work on restoration and habitat enhancement without having to go through the same hoops as a private developer. And so this legislation advances that effort, the Cutting the Green Tape initiative. So we did recommend moving it forward. It's sponsored by our sister agency, Mid-Peninsula, and we've been working with them on making sure that the environmentally beneficial projects are included and have a little bit more streamlining on the permitting process. So unless you say otherwise, then we'll keep it on as a recommended for support.
I would only say that this legislation is a little duplicative of what the administration is trying to do, and they really like to occupy this space. So, for the narrative purposes, going through the legislature, it's good to have the discussion, but something's going to need to be reconciled at the end of the day between statute and what's being proposed administratively.
Okay. And SB 926 is a follow-up from legislation that Senator Dodd passed, I believe, last year that would exempt burn bosses or people managing prescribed burns from liability. However, if a fire were to spread and it's not at the negligence of the supervisor of the burn, then there needs to be some resources to help with fire suppression. And Senator Dodd's this particular bill would be to set up, well, there you can read it right there, $20 million prescribed fire claims fund. So it's complementary to what we've already worked on in terms of allowing more prescribed fire. The next bill is essentially tries to provide funding for a jobs program that would focus on climate resiliency and mitigation adaptation projects. The bill itself does not include funding, so it's essentially sets up the program, but it isn't funding it. The Strategic Growth Council did do an assessment and believe that it would cost, approximately 1.1 million to administer the program over the life of its existence if it was a $200 million grant program. And then the alignment there with Green Jobs. So our recommendation is support. The next bill is the state resolution on Port Chicago exoneration, essentially calling on the president and Congress of the US to exonerate the 50 who were charged with mutiny after the explosion. And so while it's not binding, it's certainly consistent with our work on exoneration and telling the history of what happened at that site. Then moving on to federal legislation, unless there's any questions.
Eric, I actually have a question on this. So this jobs program, this going back to the Pittsburgh SB 989. So it creates the program, but it doesn't fund it. So then what happens?
Well, then if it is in existence, then the legislature would have to go back and add funding in the next budget cycle.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It would be contingent upon a future appropriation.
I see. Okay. All right. Thank you, Doug and Eric.
On the federal legislation, I think Peter spoke a little bit to the Recovering America's Wildlife Act. It's really a national program to help improve habitat for endangered and threatened species and other wildlife. Definitely consistent with our work on habitat restoration and also actually with the Land and Water Conservation Fund coalition that is working on it. If there's no questions there, the No Child Left Inside legislation is legislation that we have that this committee has approved in the past. It essentially provides funding to schools for teachers to have more outdoor education experience and hands-on learning to then teach children in outdoor spaces. So while the funding wouldn't directly come to the park district, we could certainly partner with schools to provide those outdoor educational opportunities. The Climate Resilience Workforce Act, I think Peter spoke a little bit to this in the beginning as well. It's essentially a conservation corps type of a program that's really focused on resiliency adaptation mitigation projects and provides a grant program for apprenticeships. So it's consistent with our green jobs and career pathways advocacy goal. And then the last bill is the resolution honoring the 200th anniversary of Frederick Law Olmsted's birth. And so that would be a non-binding resolution, but it does acknowledge the work that he did to create so many wonderful, great green and open spaces in the country. And those are our bills to support.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric. I just wanted to clarify. So these are you asking for co-sponsorship on any of these, or are we just purely support?
Thank you for asking that. I do not believe we are asking co-sponsorship at this time. I think we do support Mid-Penn in the Mullen Bill, AB 2362. So we would be open to, I believe, co-sponsorship of that. Doug or Lisa, do you have any other thoughts on any co-sponsorship?
I would only caution, we had this discussion, I think, during the last legislative committee hearing where we were talking about co-sponsorship of a couple of different bills, and Chair Eccles had mentioned and asked where the administration was on the trails bill. And at the time I didn't know. And I would say that on this bill 2362, it's probably a similar dynamic. I don't know where they're at. Again, they really like to occupy this space, they being the administration.
Yeah.
So I think support is great.
Yeah.
I don't know. Co-sponsor is not necessary.
Okay.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Doug, for that. Sorry for jumping ahead of my members here, but just wanted to clarify that what we were talking about. So Director Waspy or Director Lane, do you have any questions, comments?
I'm good with us going ahead and supporting these. I'm not sure that Olmsted had any more than one son, but I haven't looked at that in a while, and you said sons, so I think you'd want to be accurate on that. It's probably a nephew.
It could be. There were two people listed, and they both had the last name Olmsted. So I guess I did make a assumption that they were brothers, but they could be cousins.
Yeah, I think so.
Director Waspy?
Yeah, I'd support all of these. And my only question would be also about Olmsted is, Eric, you did a great job, or whomever wrote this up is really good. Did the author of the bill, Mr. or Mrs. Hill, did they mention Olmsted's relationship to the San Francisco Bay Area and specifically the regional parks, or anywhere in the bill is the regional park district mentioned? And I know it was his son that did our survey, but.
Yeah, I did not see a mention in the resolution of East Bay Parks.
All right, thank you.
Well, I probably should.
Okay, so, all right. Do one of you want to make a motion? I would think we're looking for a motion to support all of these bills, including support in concept, AB 1953. Since it's now in the suspense file and will come up next year.
I'll make that motion and just check out the Olmsted resolution so it's correct. Okay.
And I'll second.
Great, thank you. Good. If our recording secretary would like to call the roll.
Yes, definitely. This is Rachel Arbios, recording secretary, conducting roll. Chair Eccles.
Aye.
Director Lane.
Aye.
Director Waspy.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just one last item under this section of the program updates. There was a ballot initiative being circulated that would alter the percentages for approval of tax or just funding measures in general. It's in response to a few court decisions that have happened recently where judges have ruled that if a ballot measure to raise funding is passed by 50% or more, it is considered to be approved if it was initiated by an initiative campaign, citizens campaign. That has been challenged at least 3 times, and the courts have upheld it. So a group of anti-tax folks, Jarvis taxpayers and others, have put together a ballot measure to make it clear in the Constitution that a 2/3 is required no matter how the funding measure appears or makes it to the ballot. They were targeting originally November 2022, but we've learned subsequently and recently that they are likely to hold off until potentially 2024 and not submit this for this year's ballot, to appear on this year's ballot. So just wanted to make the group aware of it. I don't think we need to, or even maybe should, take a position at this time, but it is something that the California Special Districts Association and other entities are really tracking to try to make sure that you can put a ballot initiative by citizens initiative and pass with 50%. And I actually believe that's what the zoo is aiming for. I think their measure was a citizens initiative. And so they're hoping that they can seek the funding, even if it's not quite 2/3 vote. So just raising awareness on it.
Great, thank you, Eric. Do either of the other committee members have questions or comments on that? Okay, moving on then. Okay, great. So now we've already done number 4, so we'll move on to the first item under projects and programs, which is the spring scientific survey update. And I believe Lisa was going to take that one.
Absolutely. So good afternoon, Lisa Bollinger, Legislative and Policy Management Analyst, if anyone jumped on. So just wanted to give a quick update of our spring 2022 scientific survey. It is in the Government Affairs Department work plan to do 2 surveys annually. And so for the spring one, knowing that the board will be having a discussion soon on a capital program criteria matrix, we worked with design and construction to outline a survey reflecting themes and areas that other jurisdictions have put into their capital program criteria matrix to test it with our public. This survey is a survey of 600 East Bay residents. It is being conducted in 4 languages, so English, Spanish, Cantonese and Mandarin, and then also Tagalog. So I guess 5 languages, and it's also accessible in multimodal, so it can be text to online or done verbally. So lots of options striving to create an inclusive survey methodology. And it is currently in the field right now. So our hope is to have it back and to share the responses with legislative committee, possibly next month or the following. And then it will also be shared at the July 22nd board workshop on the capital improvement program criteria discussion.
And just Lisa, we probably, by the time we meet next, we would have top line results. Is that safe to say?
Correct. Yes.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the update. Director Waspy, Director Lane.
Yeah, just one question. So I didn't catch it. How many folks are going to be surveyed?
600.
600. And how did they figure out, or of the 600, was it random and you were given the option of what language you chose, or did we specifically say we want 300 English speakers and 300 Tagalog speakers, or how was that arranged?
So we did a request for proposals for this survey and requested a matrix of what could be possible. And the reason for the languages that we advance with is that they are the most spoken at home languages in the East Bay. And thanks to our GIS department for doing that 2020 census analysis. And so that's how we selected the languages. And then for the who's being surveyed, it is being weighted to East Bay demographics, so to align with the 2020 census of our communities.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Director Lane, did you have anything, or I'll keep going? Nothing, okay, great. All right, so the member and community benefit projects asks.
I can do a real swift update in the interest of time. So Doug spoke a little bit about the sort of process behind member asks, but just for sort of a top line, what's moving forward. So in the board packet, we have an outline of all of the various member asks and community project funding requests that the Government Affairs Department put in. This process is becoming more and more of an application rather than sort of just catching somebody in the hallway and sharing them a need. And so really formalizing it, especially the federal community project funding requests, they were through online portals, all really consistent, and you had to sort of identify where in the different budget allocations would this project fit in. And so we did submit a request to each of our federal and state representatives. On the federal side, we have heard back from Representative DeSaulnay's office that our request of $3.5 million for pre-construction costs at Thurgood Marshall Regional Park will be moving forward. Now, moving forward doesn't mean that we're going to be talking a grant contract in the near future. It means that he's planning to advocate on behalf of the Park District for this funding to advance. And so it's sort of just crossing another threshold. Unfortunately, a number of our Bay Trail requests were not advanced. So our requests for Martinez Bay Trail, Marsh Creek Trail, Tassajara Creek Trail, those were not advanced. We haven't heard back yet from Senator Padilla or Senator Feinstein's office, and we are also waiting to hear back from Representative Lee. On the state side of things, our request of $8 million for environmentally sensitive vegetation management. So to pair with that $10 million where we're removing vegetation, we're creating essentially a vacuum, a habitat vacuum. It needs to be filled with something. Assembly member Mia Bonta is championing the Park District's request for $8 million to do native and fire tolerant plantings. Assemblymember Tim Grayson is enthusiastically advancing a request for $3 million for the South of Bailey Road development. That project actually just had its kickoff meeting on site today with a number of our colleagues, our engineers, and others on staff are moving that work forward. Assemblymember Buffy Wicks is moving forward a $4 million request on behalf of the Park District for Miller Knox accessibility improvements at Keller Beach. So we're excited about that. And then one that we're not really sure about, but we got a last minute phone call on, and it's a little bit of a mystery to us, is whether or not Senator Glazer is moving forward a request for water bird studying of the habitat. He expressed interest in 2019, again in 2022, once our attention could be expanded beyond the pandemic. And so his office did call for an extensive amount of detail, but they did not share whether or not that request advanced. So I think their statement was they didn't want to raise expectations, but we didn't receive a no, which is positive. So again, this just means that these requests are moving forward. Nothing is secured, but we haven't gotten a no on those asks at the state level.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Any comments or questions from the committee members?
So nothing on Marsh Creek?
Nothing on Marsh Creek at this time.
I mean, Park.
Correct.
We can share, Beverly, that Senator Glazer did secure funding in last year's budget for some restoration work at the home in Marsh Creek. So there is some funding at state parks to improve the historic structure, but they haven't allocated any. The state parks haven't used any of that funding.
Great. Director Rossby, did you have anything? Okay, great. Okay. Then moving on, update about co-sponsored legislation, the best value contracting ecologically sensitive vegetation management.
I guess I can start on the best value contracting. We've had, I'd say, success. We actually had a recent opportunity to testify and support. So Lisa Gorgon went to Sacramento and we worked with her to testify at a committee hearing, and the bill passed unanimously. This was for the local government committee. So we are on track to see that advance. Unfortunately, on the ecologically sensitive vegetation management bill, that I believe has been held in suspense. So having it not advance, I think, further accentuates the Mia Bonta request, and we should be, highlighting that could be a pilot project that would help advance this legislation in an upcoming session of the legislature. So we'll continue to work and try to get the $8 million for a pilot project that our stewardship team and Kristen Van Dam is already doing some work on with the Native Plant Society out at Reinhardt Redwood. So I think that's the update. I don't know, Lisa or Doug, if you have anything else on those two bills that.
No, on design bill, that bill I do believe is advanced through the Assembly. It's over in the Senate now. Should be set for hearing within the next 2 weeks. So all systems go.
Thank you. Okay. Any comments from our committee members? Director Lane?
Well, I just want to say that I think it's been very helpful to have the legislative program outline and the goals as something that you can list here to help us categorize the bills we're working on. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Dennis, you don't look like you have anything, but let me know if you do.
That's my look when I glance down. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I have nothing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't want to slow us up.
And I am also pleased that we're
continuing
listening.
calling on you guys. So let me read the body language. Okay, great. All right. So and then were there any other matters we have under projects and programs, Lisa and Eric?
I don't think so.
No. Great. Okay. So then site visits and meetings.
We did touch on the 30 by 30 meeting already. So I don't know, unless there's any additional questions on that. I don't know that we need to, I don't know that there's much more to add.
Great. Okay.
And then I maybe let Flora speak a little bit to the walk and talk, but it was a lovely day, and the assembly member really stepped back and let our naturalist really lead the walk, and did a fantastic job. And so it was really just an opportunity for some constituents to see south of Bailey Road, and I think it went really well. But Flora, if you have any additional thoughts on it.
Just to echo what Eric said, it was we were very lucky with good weather. Thank you, Director Lane, for attending, and to President Coffey for attending. It was really good discussion, high energy, and we look forward to hosting more of these with the assembly member and with anyone who wants to come see this special site.
Thank you. Okay, Director Lane, did you have a comment? Or was that a thumbs up? Okay. All right. Okay, then moving on, do we have any public comments?
There are no additional public comments at this time.
Okay, great. So we'll thank you all, as always, for the articles and social media. I find them very helpful. And unless either Dennis or, Director Lane or Director Waspy wanted to make a comment about that, I'm going to move on to board comments.
Can I just, Director Eccles, we and thanks to Lisa flagging this, but we discovered that we provided a lot of articles for this packet. So we were thinking about if the committee would be open to it, that possibly sending electronically the articles more on a weekly basis as they come in, and social media as a way to sort of reduce paper, and also just to keep things sort of relevant. I realize by the time you get the packet that probably some of the stories are pretty dated and maybe not as relevant. So we did want to introduce that possibility at this meeting, just to maybe, provide the articles and social media updates on a more frequent basis, so they're not old and stale.
Well, okay, Director Lane.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I did read them all in the last few days, and that was a lot to read. But I also think the rest of the board would be interested in these articles. So could we send them to everybody? Or does it need to be only legislative?
I know that the clerk includes articles for the full board. So what we might do is, when we share our articles with, primarily we send them to Yuli for distribution, for the executive assistant for distribution. We could also CC the clerk's office, and they could include it maybe in their packets.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, as long as it's electronic, because I don't think we want to be sending out hundreds of pages of to all of the board members, or even to just this committee. So yeah, I think that sounds like a good suggestion, that Yolanda could also then send it out on a weekly basis, because I do think it's important to have it timely and also not be overwhelmed with a lot to review, especially right in advance of a board meeting when we have a lot of other things to review. So I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah, and I, there was a very interesting article on the Concord Naval Weapons Station development in Sino a few days ago. And I'm not sure that all of the boards saw that or not, but it was, they're having a meeting tonight, which Carlin Oberger had said could be a very interesting meeting. Let us say, said that at PAC yesterday. And so some of these, occasional clippings like that are really pretty well written and enlightening. So I would appreciate it if you would talk about the possibility of sending, looking at it maybe weekly and saying, well, here's a couple that might be of particular interest for you for this week. They're not all like that, but there are some that really are. So I'm not going to make a judgment on which would be the right ones, because we all do have our opinions. But if you would consider that, I think that would be helpful for people.
And that's an excellent example, because I don't believe that anywhere in there it mentions the Park District. But it is obviously very related to what we do at Thurgood Marshall. So I did pull it for this committee, but I can also make sure that the clerk's office has it as well.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we can move to board member comments. Director Lane, Director Waspy, anything further you want to add?
Oh. Okay, yes, I would just, I had the great opportunity to attend the California Association of Recreation and Park Districts annual conference. And one of our best, well, the best session, of a number of sessions we had down there was Eric Feeler representing the Park District and giving essentially saying how we work here, and it presented the government affairs master plan, which he gave great credit to Lisa for being a big participant in. And it was pretty amazing. It was a well-attended session. People have always talked about the Park District and our largesse. I mean, the idea of having a 4-person legislative staff is pretty amazing. But Eric really articulated what we do here. And, you can have this plan, but and our people at CARPED always say, oh, you got to meet your legislator. But what does that mean? Legislators want to meet everybody, and they always pat you on the head and say, yeah, everything's going to be fine. But Eric really showed how you really, really advocate on behalf of your agency, and specifically for what you're looking for. And a lot of, well, I won't get into it because we all know, but I mean, that whole, every little nuance of, giving the legislator and their aides all the information they need, why it's a good thing for them, why it's a good thing for us, why it's a good thing for their constituents, and then following up with photos and all the stuff we do. And everyone was pretty blown away. And I don't think it was a result of that, but CARPED has always had the ability to summon up, I think it's 74 member agencies throughout the state. And that, when you're looking for support letters, that's a pretty good group to go after. They don't have the sophistication of us. They don't have the ability to advocate like we do. So this melding of the two groups is pretty incredible. And one of the results of it was, and I've been harping on this, and so has everybody else for the last 4 or 5 years. One of the results was when we approved our budget as a board member, I was involved in approving our new budget, and we put in $70,000, which I know for us is nothing. For CARPED, that's a pretty nice little chunk of change to set aside, maybe not use every year, but accumulate and pile up for specific advocacy. We do have an advocacy firm who remain nameless, do an excellent job. They compile all the data. They say, here are the bills that affect you. Here's da 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 da. But what we were talking about, what we really want to do with that 70,000, and I'm not making an offer, Doug, but do stuff like Doug Houston does. Really make the relationships, create the relationships, have the phone numbers, have the ability to get people to come visit with us and talk to us, the key people. So it was very successful, and I'm really appreciate Eric and Lisa and the entire staff at Legislative Committee for what they do. So, I just wanted to point out that tomorrow is World Otter Day. Celebrate responsibly.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Director Osby. Director Lane?
Well, I just want to say that, Dennis and I had a chance to go to the California Greenways and Trails Conference in Modesto, which is an unusual site for us. And we did have the chance to take a tour of a wildlife refuge and Dos Rios Ranch. So that was really gratifying to see that we'd had a chance to have an early look at the new state park. And I have some beaver stories from that, but I will share with you later. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Director Lane. Yeah, my thanks to everyone here, and especially our government affairs folks and our advocates. Really appreciate all that you do. And of course, my fellow board members as well. And yeah, so thanks, everybody. If there's nothing else, we can adjourn. Oh, Doug? Oh, he's waving goodbye. Okay.
Goodbye.
Take care, Elizabeth. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good week. Thank